Our next article is at the website countryroadsmagazine.com, written by Alexandra Kennan, and it's entitled The Pascagoula Abduction. For 46 years, I kept it a secret. I didn't even tell my wife about it, Calvin Parker told me in his thick Mississippi accent, referring to the evening in October 1973. That evening, Parker was fishing on the Pascagoula River with his friend Charles Hickson. It was his first day on the job at F.B. Walker & Sons shipyard, a job Hickson had helped him to get. He was 19 years old, his wedding 1 month away, his aspirations to live a simple life. Quote, I wanted to get married. I wanted to have children. I wanted grandchildren. I wanted to buy a house and retire and fish, said Parker, now 67 years, over the phone from the back porch of his current home in Moss Point, Mississippi. So the retiring and the fishing has come about, but it was a long battle to get here. And maybe a long battle too, allegedly. The events the two men reported that night thoroughly derailed Parker's pursuit of a quiet, mundane life. It had all started when Hickson asked Parker if he wanted to go fishing after work. Parker, new in town, hadn't brought his fishing gear with him, so Hickson offered to loan him some of his. Parker said, now for a man that loves to fish from the south, that's like him offering you his wife. It's just unheard of. The men tried fishing in one location, but the swarming bugs prompted them to head back to the shipyard, where there were fewer lights to attract insects. Parker pointed out posted signs to Hickson when they pulled up, but Hickson brushed off concerns about breaking the law. That don't mean nothing. I fish here all the time. End quote. They walked down to the old pier, cast out their lines, and waited for a bite. Parker remembered, I distinctly recall looking at a boat across the way. It was an old oar boat that they do weather with, and was made out of steel. And I was thinking to myself, how does something made out of steel float? Well, that's where my mind was. And that's when I noticed the blue hazy lights coming in from behind. You could see the reflection across the water. Thinking the lights were the police, he turned to Hickson and said, Charlie, we're in trouble. You lied to me, and now we're fixing to go to jail. When the men stood up and turned around, they said they didn't see police cars, but instead a long ovular craft, ovular being egg-shaped, floating around 2 feet from the ground, emitting a blindingly bright light. There were 3 bulky-looking creatures. I still didn't know what they were. They were coming toward us. By the time they got to us, I still couldn't see, for the light was so bright. He described 2 of the creatures grabbing Hickson, and 1 grabbing him, and that's when it carried me aboard the craft. Parker said the creature stopped at the door, and injected him with what he described as a go-to-hell shot. After that, I didn't care what happened, he said. Parker described being taken aboard the craft, and by the way, this is a picture of the spot on the Pascagoula River where Parker and Hickson were fishing the night they claimed they were abducted by aliens. He said he was taken down a hallway and into a room where the creature placed him on an exam table made entirely of glass. According to Parker, at that point the gray, wrinkled creature that brought him aboard the ship left the room. That's when something came out of the ceiling, about the size of a deck of cards, he said. The square-shaped object circled around him, making a series of clicking noises. I never thought about it until here lately, but it was like this MRI I was in, except the click wasn't that loud, Parker explained, looking back, and then it just shot back up into the ceiling. Then a smaller being entered the room, which Parker said made him feel more at ease. He couldn't move his body, but he rolled his head toward the creature. She was normal, he said. Matter of fact, if I'd been in a bar drinking or something and was single, at this time, I'd have probably asked her out on a date. It looked just like a human, he explained, except for its middle fingers. Her 2 middle fingers were real long, longer than what an average person's would be. Parker recalled that without saying a word, the woman, or whatever it was, put its left hand on his jaw and opened his mouth. That's when she took her right hand and started running it down my throat, and I started to gag. She scratched me up real bad, and I was bleeding. It was a darn mess. Then it pulled its hand back out. Parker had the impression that it didn't want to hurt him anymore. Then it made a groan from deep within its throat. He said, "I don't know if you've ever heard an alligator's mating call, where they vibrate the whole air around you, but that's how it sounded." That's when the creature that Parker said initially brought him aboard the craft. He added later, "I really believe to this day it was a robot," returned and carried him back to the bank of the river. "That's where the real story starts," he said. "Then my life turned pretty much to hell right after that."